Hello, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Courtney Galster. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Itiliti Health. We're excited to be joined by our friends at the Medical Review Institute of America today. We're going to be discussing more detail and insight into the challenges and solutions of prior authorization on the clinical side. But before we dive in, let's hear a little bit more about each of our panelists. Jazreen, would you mind giving us an intro to who you are and what you do?
I'm Jazreen Buller. I'm the Chief Medical Executive of Commercial and Innovation at MRIoA. I'm a family medicine physician by background, and I practiced for over 8 years before joining the UM space, and I've been with MRIoA for just over 3 years. It's great to join you all.
Great to see you. And Bob?
Hi, I'm Bob O'Brien. I am responsible for the products and platform at Medical Review Institute of America. I have been with Medical Review Institute of America for 5 years. And previous to that, I worked at several startups and as well as with one of the national health plans for several years. So looking forward to today's conversation.
Thanks for joining us. And Michael, can you share, I know most of our listeners know who you are, but just in case there are some new folks on this webinar, can you share a little more insight into who you are and who Itiliti Health is?
Sure. My name is Michael Lunzer, and I am founder and CEO of Itiliti Health. I come from a background of solution builder, right? I like to solve problems. I've founded 2 companies prior to Itiliti Health, and Itiliti Health came from actually some work that was done at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. I was with Blue Cross Minnesota for a little while, and found this really great work that was initiated there, and we found a great way to move that work out into an independent company. So Itiliti Health is that independent company that helps streamline and automate the prior authorization process. We sell to the payer marketplace, but ultimately our solutions really significantly help the provider and the member, as well as the payer, to streamline and automate prior authorizations. Really excited to talk today and share some of the work we've done together with Medical Review Institute of America as well. So excited for today's topic.
It's exciting, and it's a long time coming for us to co-host a webinar. So we're really excited to have everybody on this call. I think before we dive into some of the challenges that we're seeing in prior authorization for behavioral health, it would be helpful for us to get an overview of the state of prior authorization at large. Michael, would you mind sharing a quick update on what you're seeing with the different organizations that you're working with?
Sure, happy to do that. Yeah, it's a very exciting time for the prior authorization marketplace in that CMS 0057 regulatory requirement for prior authorization changes are happening over the next 19 months, ultimately culminating in a pretty significant requirement for Medicare and commercial marketplace plans to support the prior authorization APIs. There's numerous other requirements within those regulations for response time and expert participation in reviews, all of which are driving a lot of change for the prior authorization marketplace right now. And Itiliti is excited to be a part of that. And that is also causing health plans to look at this in a more significant way, to look at ways that they can streamline and automate the prior authorization process, not just perform minimum requirements for the CMS regulations. And so Itiliti Health is really excited to have partnered with Medical Review Institute of America to help address a number of these challenges. It might be great for Medical Review Institute to talk a little bit about what they do and how that fits into these requirements before we dive into specifically the behavioral health topic.
Yeah, I think, Michael, let me give you a little bit of introduction maybe as to who we are. So Medical Review Institute of America is really also known as MRIoA. And we are the leading national provider of tech-enabled clinical review services for healthcare organizations, really ensuring patients receive cost-effective care at the right time in the right place. I think what's also helpful to understand is that in 2024, we completed more than 3 million individual clinical case reviews. We have an internal panel of more than 200 clinicians. That includes both MDs, nurses, as well as pharmacists. We have an extremely large external panel that we leverage. We have more than 700 clinicians on that panel, representing more than 150 specialties. All of that allows us to deliver outstanding services to our clients and their members. We have a 98% customer turnaround time result. We have a patient net promoter score of 83. We have retained over 99% of our revenue over the last 3 years, and we have an average tenure for our top 20 clients of more than 18 years, which I think is really the ultimate barometer of how well you meet your clients' needs. So we're really excited about, what the changes that are taking place in the PA marketplace, and also the partnership that we have with Itiliti Health.
And one of the things that we see a lot in the state requirements as well as the national requirements is the requirement for a specialist to be a part of a clinical review. Can you talk a little bit about how you facilitate that and how important that is in your side of the world?
So we're able to really provide a specialist review across all 50 states when there is a specialist that needs to have a specific state license, including the specialty panel, as Bob mentioned, that covers those over 150 specialties and subspecialties. So we're really able to meet our clients' needs when they have that niche requirement for a geneticist in the state of Texas, for example.
That's great.
So tell me a little bit more, Michael, about how Itiliti Health fits into the prior auth ecosystem, and then we'll learn a little bit more about where MRIoA fits into that ecosystem as well.
Sure. So Itiliti Health helps the payer to store and communicate their prior authorization rules, policies, and then helps to drive the workflow. So in other words, we have technology systems that are provided as a software as a service tool that help the health plan codify their prior auth rules and policies. And those are really important to the workflow experience of the provider as they're submitting a prior authorization. And then when prior authorizations are submitted, we have technology that helps the health plan automate answers for those prior authorization requests that are easy to answer, specifically based upon location and diagnosis code and provider ID and those types of data elements. We can automate decisions. And then we have tools that can help health insurance companies improve their process of actually reviewing those submissions. And that's kind of where Itiliti Health ends the process. We don't provide the human resources that participate in the experience of making decisions. We're a true software as a service product. So we help the health plan codify their rules, ingest them into our system, and then help to interact in the workflow of their process. And then we turn over the keys for managing our technology to the health plan or a third party. So that's kind of the end of the Itiliti Health barriers or component of the process. And I'd be curious for the Medical Review Institute of America to talk a little bit about where do you pick up that process and how do you help finalize this experience for the provider or the payer?
Sure. So actually, we are able to take that next component from what you're doing and provide, whether it's the intake level, the nurse pharmacist level review, or the initial physician review, all the way up to the external review for all lines of business. So we're able to provide a specialist match, whether that be at the initial level or the appeal level, using our 700 plus physicians across 150 specialties and subspecialties. So we're really able to allow for whatever component of the review spectrum that the assistance is required, right? So if it's at the intake level or at the review by a physician, we're able to provide that.
That was so helpful. And I think knowing that as we dive into today's conversation is so helpful as well. Which leads me to my first question on our agenda today. What we're hearing is that there are some specific challenges to prior authorization in the behavioral health space. Your team is the expert at solving these challenges for the clients that you work with. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those challenges are that you're seeing and how you're seeing payers, TPAs, and other organizations in the space solve those challenges?
Absolutely. So I think it's a very appropriate conversation to have. We have so many clients, payers that are coming to us with needs in the behavioral health space. And really, one of the major challenges facing mental health care is a growing need for services, along with delays in PA that not only delay access to necessary care, but also add significant costs to the mental health care system. Unfortunately, delays in the PA can lead to delays in access to, of course, necessary care for the patient, which can in turn negatively impact patient health outcomes, and prompt access to affordable behavioral health care is critical, of course, right? So particularly when care is already in high demand, we find that these challenges are precipitated by PA challenges.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's as we know I guess from a personal experience, there's so many people that have personal experiences with behavioral health and access, and that critical time frame of getting quick access to care is so important. And how is that showing itself in the current marketplace and in the demand for your services?
So what we're seeing from clients is there are several pressures that they're seeing, right? One is state legislation around turnaround time, which is forcing them to speed up what they're doing. But with that also comes a distinct need for access to physicians that can provide peer-to-peer consults and do reviews in a very timely manner. And so what we find is clients coming to us and asking, I need access to your panel to turn these, it might be a concurrent review process around same day. So that I've got people that have been approved for a certain period of time. Now they're coming up on that, and I need to review whether we should continue it, or if they no longer meet that criteria and need to move to some other type of service level. And so that's what we're seeing from the market is clients approaching us to help them meet the needs of their members as they're navigating through these crises.
Additionally, I can add that we also find a need for board certification in addiction medicine, BCBA, which is board certified behavioral analysts, and along with child psychology, clinical psychology, autism, and applied behavioral analysis. So that's the ABA reviews. These kind of more niche specialties within psychiatry is where we have a lot of I guess you could say we have a lot of payers coming to us for filling those needs for them.
And as Itiliti Health, one of the things we've seen, I would highly endorse Medical Review Institute of America, is that it's not just the ability to service this one specialty area, but it's the one destination or one provider, payer, one vendor that can support a broad range of these specialty requirements. So that allows the payer or the TPA to leverage a broader panel of experts, not just this one category, which is obviously really important right now. So
yes, you're absolutely right. And then the specialty requirement for a state match also. So if there is a specific state that requires state licensing in that state, along with a subspecialty match, we're able to really provide both of those. And for payers that work in multiple states, we're able to assist in all 50 states with that licensure and the subspecialty requirements.
So as you think about how technology fits into the solution for some of these challenges, what technology are you using to solve some of the challenges that your clients are facing?
So this is where the partnership with Itiliti works really well, because as Itiliti is deployed within payers, what they help to ensure is that the cases that are submitted are complete and actually appropriate for the patient and the given CPT code that may be coming in. What that allows us to do is to focus our clinical resources on appropriate clinical criteria. And so one, it's upfront technology, ensuring that downstream we're getting the right information, the clinical summary, the clinical policy, and that for the member to do the clinical review. What we're also doing, though, because all of our reviews are done by a clinician, whether it's a nurse or a physician or a pharmacist, if it happens to be a medication, is that we can use technology to help locate appropriate clinical information within the medical records. Medical records can be 50, 100, 500 pages. So navigating that type of structure can be challenging. So using some of the new technology, what we're able to do is ask questions of the medical records and have it search out where the appropriate information is, so that we can tie that back to the clinical criteria, so that we're giving appropriate decisioning based on the criteria that the plan has selected.
Yeah, and I think just to echo what Bob was saying and talk a little bit about Itiliti Health and how we help at the front end, which enhances the back end of this experience, or the decisioning experience. And that's really a big part of what's being driven by the CMS 0057 APIs, is that the prior authorization process in general, using technology, is helping to ensure that providers know what needs to be submitted, what questions need to be answered by the provider. And that in turn is helping streamline and automate decisioning before it gets to a live human. But then when it does get to a live resource at Medical Review Institute of America, it's a fully populated record with all of the necessary information that lets each person along the way participate in this process efficiently, rather than having to come back and ask for more data, or in a later stage, or worse, reject a prior auth because the data is not available.
And to add to that, I think that the smart solutions that we're discussing here, they help to decrease the burden of the PA process for both the physicians, the treating providers, and the physicians on the UM process component, not just the physicians, but all the clinicians that work in the UM process. And it allows for a more appropriate use of resources. So you don't have physicians doing administrative tasks that may be time consuming and sometimes challenging and leading to burnout across the full spectrum of what all clinicians do.
Absolutely. If we can get all the right information submitted up front, there's much less need for peer-to-peer reviews on the back end, which is where so much time and cost is located in this process. So that's a big impact of streamlining and improving the overall data quality up front in this process.
One of the things that we've seen is the challenges we face is incomplete information, and then having to go back to providers. Is we had experience where without Itiliti, more than half of the submissions required us to go back to the providers and ask for additional information. So when you're talking about something that is time sensitive as behavioral health is, it's really imperative that the upfront process help focus on what is the required information, so that the clinical review can be done in such a timely manner. Because when we have to go back and ask for additional information, that adds significant time to the whole process, which just delays the care to the member that needs it.
One of the challenges that both of you have brought up is the challenge of the workforce. There are fewer workers in this space. It is a complicated space to work in, so you need people who have experience and expertise that they can apply to different prior authorization situations. Can you share a little bit more about the clinical and administrative staffing challenges that you're seeing and how this type of technology is impacting the way that you are solving that challenge?
I think, Courtney, it's not necessarily the staffing in that respect. I think it's using the staffing more appropriately for what their skill set is really important. And I think that that improves the administrative burden, and it also improves the time spent on paperwork. Like Bob said, if there's hundreds of pages attached, sorting through those and ensuring that you're looking at the most recent notes in a sequential pattern is really important. And I think that when you have some of that information laid out more appropriately and accurately, you're able to use your clinical resources clinically, and you wouldn't be necessarily fighting a staffing shortage. You'd just be able to do more of the appropriate work that's required of that.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I
Yeah.
think that the opportunity here is all of the efficiencies that we bring to bear in the process kind of reduce the overall staffing need, right?
Yeah.
And that's also on the technology side too. So for instance, one of the things we find with our solutions is we have a product that helps the provider know what requires a prior authorization. Then we have another product that helps providers to really dig into what are the submission requirements, what are the details, what are the policy details, and then actually submitting and gathering those details. We typically find that we implement those in sequence because giving the provider a quick answer of what requires a prior authorization reduces the health plan's need to answer all those questions verbally, and that gives them more resources and more efficiency to work on the next step of the implementation. And similarly, as we perfect the quality of data and the quality of information that shows up at a Medical Review Institute of America, they can be more efficient in answering those questions. And then the technologies that Medical Review Institute of America brings to bear increases the efficiency of their staff. So all in all, we're solving staffing challenges for the payer or the TPA, but we're doing it with the efficiencies that each of us bring to the table, as well as the actual staff that Medical Review Institute of America brings to the table.
So I have a curveball question for the three of you. As you're thinking about all of these solutions that are being implemented and how fast the world of prior authorization is changing, what do you think this space will look like in 5 years?
I'll let Michael go first.
I was gonna say Jetsons. No, I'm joking.
You know, as we all know, the world of healthcare moves very slowly, but this particular problem is in demand to be solved much faster than we all are used to operating. I think what's really great about the CMS requirements is that there are three different components of the CMS requirement. The first of which is, does something require a prior auth? The second component is, what data is necessary, and is there a questionnaire that can be answered? And so those two components are things that can be improved dramatically in the next 2 years, maybe 3 years. We'll see a larger percent of payers utilizing an efficient means to drive those questions and answers. And that will, as we've talked about, streamline the human resource and allow them to really bring their expertise to the table and actually, do a better job, because without the right information and without the structure to that information, those humans are spending a lot of unnecessary time digging through data and finding the data is not there, right? So that first part of the process is going to be, I hope, solved in the next 3 years. And we'll see some more automation in the upfront cases that can be resolved faster. And because of that, the human component of this, the clinical review, will be able to be more accurate, more efficient, and ultimately done with better expertise. Because again, today it's challenging, I'm sure, for MRIoA to sometimes even know, based upon what's submitted, which type of expertise might be needed. So the front end of this process is going to get better. Ultimately, we hope that this will mean that more and more prior auths will happen instantaneously. And ultimately, what that means is that the human resources will be better, be able to spend their time perfecting those cases that need review. So many, and that essentially means any declines. So anytime a prior authorization is rejected, it requires a human review. And that human review is where oftentimes we get into the scenario where something is rejected and later approved, which is really driving a huge portion of clients, the consumers' frustration with this process. So I think improving the technology will allow the expertise of Medical Review Institute of America to do an even better job of giving accurate first-time response, and standardizing the intelligence, the clinical intelligence that's necessary to do a good job. So that's what I think from a technology perspective is the spectrum of change. I do want to come back and answer your specific question. In 5 years, what does this look like? I think it looks like a much more efficient process that squeezes out all of the errors and inefficiencies at the front end. So providers know what requirements are there. The documents are submitted sometimes automatically. Decisions are made more automatically, but then ultimately there are still going to be human reviews, and they will be done more effectively and better because they'll be handed a much better case before they even get to the beginning of the process. So I'd love to get the MRIoA perspective on how closely I've mirrored what you think is going to be the case in 5 years, or how far off I am.
Yeah, what I would say, Michael, is I think that the process becomes more streamlined, and it becomes streamlined because right now a lot of the information resides in different silos that don't talk to each other. And I think over the next several years, those silos start to come down. As that happens and data starts to get exchanged in a more real-time basis, we're able to start to invest in where is the real value with the prior authorization process. And by that, I mean, it's about raising clinical quality and making sure that the patient is getting the most appropriate care. And so I think over the next 5 years, we'll begin to see a migration away from maybe some things that don't add a lot of value to the overall process, but focusing more on all of the emerging technology from a medical standpoint, whether it's oncology treatments, whether it's new medications, whether it's new surgeries, whether it's new things coming on, to make sure that as those emerging solutions for patient care come out, that we've got clinical criteria that is readily available and can be explained to help assist physicians as they navigate these new solutions. And so we'll move away from what we see as PA today to more nuanced with more unusual cases in 5 years.
So almost
Catherine?
more of a clinical decision support
Yeah.
concept that's going to help the provider up front to make better decisions, ultimately getting to the right care at the right time and avoiding the mistakes, right? Or getting them the best care.
Yes.
And I would say that seeing the CMS regulations and regulations that are in various states moving towards adding technology and adding, I think, timelines in place to ensure that things move. Like you said, healthcare is a slow moving, sometimes change. And so ensuring that the change in the trajectory are moving with, I think, what's happening in the world, right? And ensuring that we're staying on top of what is available out there, but also ensuring, I think for us, for Medical Review Institute of America, ensuring that we're always still having the human touch, the physician, the nurse reviewing the case, the pharmacist, and not losing sight of the appropriateness and the importance of that, along with using the technology that's available in an appropriate and resourceful way.
The one thing that I didn't hear any of you say was that technology is going to replace the human component of handling prior authorizations, which I think is what everyone worries about when they hear about the AI or automation technology coming into play. So I think that's probably reassuring to people who are worried about the impact AI is going to have on prior authorization.
Yeah, I think the objective that we all have is getting to yes faster and making sure that a no is smarter, right? And thorough and perhaps even no, but here's what you really might want to do, right? Because that I think is when I think about what drives consumers crazy right now, it's they have a perception that the first time around a PA will get rejected and that an appeal will always get approved. And that to the consumer feels like this system is intending to deny care. And unfortunately, the reality of those denials that are ultimately approved has more to do with the quality on the front end of the process, getting the right information so that that live human can make an informed decision and get them the right answer. And then getting the right expertise, because there probably are many cases, and this is why state regulations are changing, where if a non-specific physician is reviewing a case, they may make the wrong answer, the wrong decision, because they're not as familiar with the material. So that's where Medical Review Institute of America having the expertise and the licensure to make sure that the right people are reviewing cases gets to the right answer up front.
And to add to that, I think, as Bob mentioned earlier, doing over, many millions of reviews a year, we do have the experience and kind of industry benchmarks and the experience for our reviewers to have seen a variety of things many times. So that's important.
Yeah, I think the other is, a lot of the states are beginning, and I think to recognize maybe we ought to do some reporting on why something wasn't approved and why something was denied. And I think what will come out of that is that the reason there may be an initial denial and then an approval is all the information wasn't sent in with the initial request, and therefore it couldn't be approved because the information wasn't there to justify the approval. Then when all the information comes in, it's all of a sudden approved, not because it's appealed, but because the information required to actually make the decision is there. And it's why tools, like Itiliti has that have been deployed with health plans are so important, because while we talk about them from making it easier on the physician, the reality is we're all in this to help the member, and we're help the patient and help them get the right care at the right time. And by making sure that the correct information is submitted allows us all to actually achieve the goal that we want to have.
And having been a treating provider and seeing the other side of it, I think it is unclear many times what is required of an initial level review, what's an appropriate amount of information, and what is a necessary amount of information to lead to a decision that is, again, patient-centric. And I think that, like we all said here, is that Itiliti providing that front-end solution or front-end clarification even just on what is needed to move the review along so that the patient can get what they need as quickly and as appropriately.
So if you could give a payer a piece of advice based on what you know today and what you think the future looks like about the prior authorization solution that they're implementing, what would that advice be?
My advice would be to invest in the upfront submission process with Itiliti, because it allows the physician to do the job they want to do. It allows the payer to do the job they want to do, which is facilitate the process and to make sure that the right care is being delivered. And then it allows, when cases and clinical reviews need to be done, that the right information is sent to MRIoA for us to be able to turn those around quickly and accurately. But it all starts with the process up front. And once that is streamlined and improved, the rest of the process really works much quicker and much better.
And this is, I think, where we work really well together, because I think the other component of this is the payer needs to ensure that they have the right specialties participating in the prior auth process. There are state requirements and federal requirements that are adding to those mandates to say you need to have the right licensure, the right specialty. But even if there isn't a mandate, it should be the expected or the planned result for the payer to make sure they have the right skills to effectively answer these questions. And again, that's where MRIoA has the ability to bring in the scale to help solve some of the staffing challenges of the payer, as well as the expertise on the back end of the process to make sure the right resources are reviewing prior authorizations. And that's just an illustration of why our two companies are such a great fit to work together and to present this material, because ultimately the prior authorization solution involves multiple parties, and those parties that are willing to work together to solve this on behalf of the payer, the provider, and the member can really make a big difference in this process.
Well, this was great insight, and you all offer a different perspective that's unique to this process, but really ties together the staffing and technology components of prior authorization. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of the things that you shared today. We will be adding the contact information for all of today's panelists in the chat. Please feel free to download that and reach out to them if you have additional questions. Otherwise, we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
It's great talking with you.